Hello and welcome to News Center. I'm Parikshit Luthara. The Gaza Health Ministry has claimed that the death toll among Palestinians has crossed 8,000, of which over half are children in Israel. The death toll is more than 1,400. The Israel Defense Forces have expanded their military offensive. They claim to have struck 600 targets in Gaza in 24 hours. The targets included the area near Al-Azhar University, from where IDF said an anti-tank missile was about to be launched. Weapons warehouses belonging to Hamas were targeted as well. As per reports, heavy bombardment was also witnessed around Al-Quds hospital, where over 10,000 Palestinians have sought refuge. Yesterday, around 33 aid trucks carrying humanitarian aid reached Gaza from Egypt's Rafah border, the largest since the conflict began. Thousands of Gaza residents broke into UN warehouses to get hold of essential items. To take this forward, I'm now joined by former diplomat Kadira, Pethiyagoda, Israeli journalist Yaakov Katz, former ambassador Anil Trigunayat. We're also joined by Farhat Mantoo, executive director South Asia at Doctors Without Borders. Farhat, if I can come to you, give us a sense of how the communications blackout has impacted the Gaza Strip.
Thank you for having me on the show. I'm at a loss of words if I would say catastrophic, dire, or anything. But let me illustrate to you what it means at current point of time. So the death toll in Gaza, as you rightly pointed out, has crossed the 8,000 mark. The entire Gaza has roughly 3,500 bed capacity. And out of the 35 health facilities, 12 have been declared non-functional as of October 24. So where do we stand now? 3,500 beds with more than 19,000 injured. So we are talking about health facilities who have not double, triple, but even more number of injured to cater to at a time when the entire Gaza Strip is under siege and indiscriminate bombing. Now, what happens with this blackout, which lasted for 36 hours for us as an organization? The first thing was we lost touch and contact with many of our staff that are on the ground. But more than that, which was an extreme alarm for us because we could not see how we else could support our teams on the ground. But imagine when there is this bombing going on, what happens within Gaza? How do ambulances go and look for injured if there is a complete breakdown of an already broken network that we are talking about?
You're absolutely right. And what you are quoting is an alarming figure. Only 3,500 beds, and there are over 19,000 injured. Ambassador Trigunayat, to get you in at this point, the Israeli army is, of course, expanding the ground operations with more forces entering Gaza. What is the sense that you're getting as to where Netanyahu would like to take this war against the Hamas? Where could it all stop?
Well, as far as the Israeli government, various ministers and others have claimed that this time they're out to completely destroy the capabilities of Hamas and to capture or kill as many Hamas leaders. So that is what they are trying to head for. And that has been from day one their strategy. They have been bombing continuously all these 3 weeks now. And now that the ground invasion, or they call it special operations, have begun, and they're very targeted. Let us not forget that, even though the Israeli intelligence or the military was not so alert when these Hamas attacks took place on October 7th, the fact is that Israelis know every bit of this Gaza Strip completely. They know where things are, and they know what kind of challenges it is. But despite having information and intelligence, it is not always easy in a ground war. We have seen it in different contexts everywhere. Even President Biden told Netanyahu about the difficulties US faced in Iraq and also in Afghanistan. So the land invasion has its own limitations. The other side is not a proper army. It is a guerrilla force fighting for their cause in a way they think is proper. But the army and the proper army has its own code of conduct, and it follows that. But at this time, I think there is a question of existential threat. On both sides are trying to, especially Hamas will try to save itself. The only tool in their kit at the moment is those 239 or more hostages, whose lives is very important. And I think that is also one of the major objectives of the IDF and Mr. Netanyahu to get them released as fast as possible. And that's the reason that the Americans and the Western countries, whose citizens are also involved in that, are involved in this.
Right. Dr. Kadira, Pethiyagoda, if I were to get you in at this point, when it comes to Qatar, how much leverage does it have over the Hamas and leverage as a mediator in this conflict between Israel and Hamas right now?
I think Qatar has a reasonable amount of influence over Hamas. I think, obviously, the Hamas leadership is based in Doha. They've given them safe haven. They provide a lot of funding to Gaza in terms of aid. But I think that it is not complete leverage in the sense that Hamas also has backers from completely separate sources, including Iran. And I think, at this stage, Hezbollah is an important actor as well. So I think that in terms of negotiations, Qatar is a very important actor, given its relationship with Iran, its relationship with the United States, and its relationship with Hamas. But it doesn't have complete control or complete leverage over Hamas. And I think this conflict and this particular sort of iteration of the Israel-Palestine conflict is far more global than previous iterations, because now you've got this, a war going on in Ukraine between the West and Russia. You see a rise of non-Western powers like China and Russia in the Middle East. And I think, and both of those countries have strong relationships with Iran. So I think this has become a much more globally relevant conflict in this particular iteration.
Right. Let me go back to our guest from Medicine Sans Frontiers. We have been joined by Farhat Mantoo. And Farhat, I would like to ask you about the number of those killed on those ground. We're hearing about different numbers right now. What is something that your experts, your teams on the ground can share?
Look, there are a few things that are critical for understanding. We are talking about visible numbers and we are talking about invisible numbers. When I say, what does this mean? Visible numbers are the number of people who have been killed and wounded in this escalation. But there is a lot more than that, because where do all the people who would seek help in a regular situation, a pregnant woman, a patient who needs dialysis, patient who needs cancer treatment, NCD treatment, newly born children, where would they go? So that is one aspect of it, which we do not have at this point of time any visibility in what is happening in that space, because the health infrastructure is so overburdened, both with a heavy influx of patients in the hospital. Talk about Al-Shifa Hospital, we are talking about 750 bedded to 800 bed hospital. It is running 3 times of its capacity with limited or no fuel, with challenges around water, supply of medicines and essential elements that are critical for running a hospital. What is here that I would really like to
also like to understand from you, to what extent is Israel seeking a complete evacuation of Gaza, evacuation of all hospitals?
Okay, so for the sake of viewers, let me kind of try to visualize what is Gaza Strip. What are we talking about? We're talking about one of the densely populated kind of part of the world, which is not more than 365 square kilometers. So if you want to go from north towards south, we are talking about a car ride of less than an hour, so which is 25 miles. That's all we are talking about. When it comes to talking about evacuating from north to south, we also have to recognize that southern part of Gaza is not as if it's prepared to take on the internally displaced people that would come from the north. So there are not pre-established facilities where people would go and seek shelter. People are seeking shelter wherever they can find a space. There is no safe space to go. And also to say, it is not that the southern part of Gaza is not being bombarded. We have heard incidents from the staff members who have moved towards south that there have been incidents of bombing in places which would be considered safe. So if we look at just the statistics from October 23 from WHO, 72 healthcare facilities have been attacked. So there is no safe space for people to go and seek shelter. People would usually go and seek shelter in a school, in a hospital. Hospitals are being used for shelter by, and all the more if you look at how the numbers look like. If we talk about 8,000 dead individuals, we are talking about, as per Palestinian health authorities and OCHA, they say roughly 62% of them are women and children. So we're talking about the most vulnerable in the group that are being the victims of what's happening there.
All right. Ambassador Trigunayat, 23 days, that's the number of days the war has been going on. What's the risk of it escalating and becoming a regional conflict, a larger regional war?
Well, at the moment, I think that everybody is interested that it does not become. But as we all know, that the wars can go beyond the intended outreach at any time, at the smallest mistake. And it is quite possible that it can go further. Already, Hezbollah and Syria and Israel are engaged. The Americans have been also being attacked and are attacking the IRGC, or for that matter, the Hezbollah hideouts and the weapon dumps in Syria. So we are looking at it that most of the fronts are being opened. But at the same time, Iran, which is supposed to have a close relationship with all these three H, as the Hamas, Hezbollah, and the Houthis, has an advantage in this with a plausible deniability as well. But at the same time, every country in the region is very worried about this. It's not only because it can go anywhere. One or two missiles here and there falling, you might have a trigger there. So this is something that needs to be stopped. The international community has completely failed. The United Nations has become totally ineffective. We have seen what kind of things are happening. So there is nobody at the moment who is able to control this war. This will continue. Israel wants to take it to its logical conclusion. But as I said, that the fate of the hostages will be a very important factor in this.
Right. The fate of the hostages will be an important factor in where this war heads from here. Farhat, Mantoo, thank you very much for joining us on the program right now. We are taking a short break, but we will request Ambassador Anil Trigunayat and Kadira Pethiyagoda to stay on with us. When we return, we will be talking about 8 former Navy personnel from India